So, I had a dream last night that my rising sign is Leo, not Virgo, which should make me born half an hour earlier than I am. All astrologers nearly insist that I must be Leo rising. So I thought, well, one way of responding to that is I'll put on my tiger onesie. I'll put a tiger in my tank and talk about power, which is what I'm going to do. And now I've had COVID. I'm still at the edges of it where I feel wasted some of the time. Yeah. I haven't got that oomph. I haven't got that creative power in the way that I usually have it. And that's the reflection, one of the reflections that's led to this video. That oomph that means, or lack of, which means I'm not writing a book. I'm writing a book on chaos shamanism at the moment. It took me by surprise. I started it a couple of months ago when I started making videos. I soon realized there's a whole book here. So I've been editing the YouTube transcripts, which YouTube kindly provides for free. So I've had the oomph to make like the odd video. Yeah, I've got a bit of oomph. Or to do posts on Facebook. Yeah, yeah, stirring things. Yeah. Keeping us thinking, keeping us thinking. That's what I like to do. I like to think. Um, and I always say what I mean. People think, oh, you're just being contrary. It's like, no, I always say what I think. I have the courage to do that. That's what's happening. Um, so I haven't got the power to write a book at the moment. That's too big. Yeah, I've got little bits of power to do posts and the odd video. But it's not like I'm lacking in power. And it made me think, well, there's two types of power. There's the power to be and the power to do. If you like, they're masculine and feminine in nature, in the traditional descriptions of masculine and feminine, which do have a considerable overlap with male and female. But by no means is that the whole story. It's more complex than that. So being ill has given me the power to be. It's got that kind of power, which, if you like, is the more classically feminine power. It's to be with myself. It's to be with my feelings. It's to have a broader sense of what my life's about, at least feeling connected to that wider pattern of what my life's about. Feeling the sort of that sense of meaning and destiny and reason for being here, even though I haven't got words for it. It's a feeling thing. The meaning of life is a feeling. It's not a concept. It's not a proposition. This is why the computer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy couldn't get the answer. Yeah, it came up with 42. And he said, well, you've asked the wrong question. And actually, there isn't an answer, not in words. It's a feeling. Yeah. We only complain about life lacking meaning because we're not feeling it. Yeah. And that meaning is that kind of fiery connection to why we're here, to that source of life in us that keeps bubbling up. That's always wanting to unfold. That's what gives us meaning. That's what keeps us here. And so that feeling is as strong as ever, even though I'm ill. It means I can do nothing all day and feel, or very little, and feel okay about it, not feel that I ought to be doing more, putting myself under that kind of pressure, which isn't all bad either. Yeah. I need to keep following that thread in my life. And that, in a way, is the more masculine side of it, the creative side of it. So the feminine power, if you like, is that ability to be and to be connected and to feel. And it may not be doing anything obvious. It holds the power. And if the masculine has any sense, it will go to that kind of power for guidance. It needs to be in the service of that kind of power, that kind of guidance. Otherwise, it will get out of balance. And similarly, that feminine power gets out of balance if it's not doing anything. If it hasn't got that Mars energy. So there's these two kinds of power. And normally I'm functioning for that masculine creative power. I'm doing something. I'm making stuff happen. Yeah. On a number of different levels. There's writing my book, but there's doing readings. There's writing posts. There's other things, just keeping my life running. Yeah. Getting my house painted. I do stuff. Even though I'm not that busy, there's always that push. That masculine power in me is strong. And yet, when I rarely get ill, it throws me back into this feminine power. And so that's my first reflection. There's these different types of power in us. And doing a lot isn't the same as being powerful. It's only truly powerful when it has that deeper source. Yeah, when it's spirit, when it's not just about your own personal ambition. That gives you a certain kind of power, but this is a deeper kind of power that I'm talking about. And that has to be connected to the feminine. And so we swing between these two poles. We integrate them gradually in our lives. And I think Indigenous people did understand those different types of power that the masculine and the feminine had. And that was often reflected in the relationships between the men and the women. And of course, they get it wrong sometimes. And of course, men have to be restrained. Men, one way it often goes wrong is men don't listen. Yeah? We don't listen to the feminine power. And the job of women is to get men to listen to that. Use your wiles, use your guiles, use your skills to get us to listen. And then things will be in balance. We'll each be bringing our own power, our own natural power to the table. Okay, that's the first reflection on power. These two types of power. We need to unfold both within us. Men, it's often the listening to ourselves, quiet, getting ill type of power. Women, the type of power is often the not worrying what other people think, not feeling beholden to looking after other people, but what is it that I am called to do? What is it the universe wants me to do that I love? Yeah. Power comes through what we love and doing that. Okay, the other reflection on power I want to talk about, it's to do with Indigenous people. I just took a quick break there. Get a bit of power back because I'm still a bit ill, which is a great place to do a video from. It's to do with putting Indigenous people on pedestals, thinking that they have the power and we don't. I don't mean power over in a worldly sense. Well, I'm talking about power right through this video. I mean that power, that inner power, that spirit power. We easily think that they have it and we don't. There's even some proponents on Facebook who will insist that the work they do is infinitely more powerful than anything we can do. And that's just wrong. That's just disempowering. And I know one person who does that. He then sets himself up as the conduit, as the channel for these Indigenous people he knows who've got all the power. He's their representative. Yeah, it's a game. It's his own kind of power game. So we really need to watch out for that. Catholics do it with the Pope. Yeah, he's been appointed by God, and you bow down before him. And it doesn't mean that certain people aren't worthy of respect, but that's not the point. We have the goods. Now just think about it. Most Indigenous people are just ordinary people. If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you've got something else going on in you that feels life lived by ordinary material values is somehow flat. On its own, it's not enough. We can't ignore that side of life, that spiritual bypass to do that. But that alone is not enough. And you find yourself in a minority when that's how you feel about life. I began to feel about life like that when I was about 20. It was moved on rapidly by taking a load of magic mushrooms. It really um, helped kind of birth that metaphysical quest as central to who I am. And I knew I couldn't do anything normal. I do my best to do regular normal stuff, and you have to have that in your life. And you've got to be able to take care of money and family and all of that. But fundamentally, there's this other thing. Yeah. And I find myself in a small minority. And you probably do as well. You're in a small minority. We can forget that because the internet and modern life enables us to come together in ways that we haven't previously. And that can be a blessing. That can be a gift. But it is a minority thing. And it's why you have ceremonies in indigenous situations, why you have church in our situation, because people aren't actually that interested in it. Yeah. They're more interested in the day to day, and that gives them meaning to their lives. And they don't necessarily think very much about their values. They just live them. Life to them is straightforward and it's simple. But we have something different going on. And we have to find confidence in it because we may well be judged as we may well be found wanting by the consensus reality and people who live from that. Yeah. But we have this thing in us which is our own, and that's our power. It's when we're listening to that, that is our power. Now, like I said, indigenous people are like us. Most of them want to live ordinary lives. We have an inner power that most of them won't have. We have the goods. And what about the people who do have that power? Well, are they more powerful than us? Yeah. Do they have the real goods and we don't? When an indigenous person walks in the room, everyone loses their critical faculty. Everyone thinks they're the one with the wisdom. I've seen it time and again. And they're not. They've got something, but you get to know them. And they're really lacking in certain ways. They can be really stupid in many ways, just like we can be stupid in certain ways. And you also meet people in our society. Yes, they have a spirit gift. They can do work for people. Yeah. Particularly when they're letting spirit speak through them. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have an awful lot of their own wisdom. And that can mean that actually they get it wrong sometimes if their own stuff's in the way. And you get this amongst Native Americans as well. I mean, I used to have a Native Canadian used to come and stay with me. He told me about the Chips family in North America. They're well known as healers. And he knew one of them personally. Well, the whole family would descend on people. You'd hear about someone, the Chips family had come to stay. And you'd really commiserate with them because they would steal everything. They'd eat you out of house and home and then move on. But some of them were great healers. And my friend Ron, he knew one of them. And he said he spent most of his time in an alcoholic haze. Yeah, he would drink himself stupid. And then someone would need healing. And he'd shift out of it. They'd give him a load of coffee. He'd shift out of it. And suddenly there was this full-on healer there. And he would do the work. And it was really good work. And then he'd go back to his old ways. So healers, they can be a funny bunch. And we get the same in this culture. We get people who could do some really good work, and yet they can behave in a really crap way in other ways. Yeah, you better watch out. I've known that intimately in my life. I've really known it. Yeah, those kind of extremes in one person. It's like they're separate. And we need them to be speaking to each other. It's like, yeah, of course we have a shadow. Of course we get it wrong sometimes, but at least we should know it. Yeah. Afterwards, at any rate, be able to look back and hold ourselves to account. But I'm talking about people who do not hold themselves to account. They haven't just got a shadow like you and me. They live it and don't hold it to account, don't recognize it. And it's the same amongst indigenous people. And then here's another thing. In a tribal situation, yeah, the healers, they will have a spirit gift. And it's passed down through the family. It's inherited, those sorts of gifts. Well, why wouldn't it be? Everything's inherited to some degree. Yeah. It doesn't mean we're not our own person. Yeah, but we're born amongst souls where there's a resonance and it gets passed on in one way or another. DNA is part of the story, but it's not the whole story. Upbringing is part of the story, but it's certainly not the whole story, much less than we like to think it is. Parental fallacy, as it's known. So, a lot of these healers, they're going to be ordinary people who've got a spirit gift that's passed down through the family. And yeah, they will do real healing. They will do good healing. Then they'll go back to being ordinary people. Fair enough. And they live within the mythology and the belief system and the stories of their people. Some healers, I'd suggest the more powerful ones, are able to step outside of that. My friend Ron, I said to him, don't your people get fundamentalist about their creation myth? He goes, no, we've got more than one and they contradict each other. I thought that's great, yeah. But he had that kind of ability to step outside, yeah. And you see your stories as just stories, useful stories, necessary stories. And at a time like this, where we have no unifying mythology anymore, it becomes the task, the calling of some shamans, some teachers, some healers to help recreate that mythological foundation without which people cannot have psychological stability. That's where your healing work starts. Now, most healers don't have that kind of power. They're happy to remain within the story that they're given. And you see this in our one. Yeah? People learn core shamanism. It gives a set of stories and it works up to a point. It's a bit limited in certain ways, but they're happy with that. They'll then go and set themselves up as teachers, but they still teach basically the same stuff. Yeah? They're happy within that story. That's fair enough. That's where they are. But their power is limited. This is where the artist comes in. So this reflection came out of a friend's thoughts about the shaman as artist in our society. And I read a quote about the artist talking about helping people see the world differently, helping them reimagine life and our place in the universe. And I thought, well, actually, that's a pretty high level of functioning. That's not what most shamans are about. They function within the received wisdom, the received stories, and they do good work within that. But it is their world. It's the world they live in. That kind of higher level, when you're standing outside it, that is called on nowadays because we don't have the unifying mythology anymore. Or the most unifying one we've got is the scientific mythology. We all kind of buy that one. Yeah, Big Bang, that's how it started. Before that, we don't know. Then evolution, how life first started, we don't know. Yeah, but we believe that. That is actually our unifying story. But in a sense, it's not a mythology because it has no magic. It doesn't have the miraculous about it. So the job of the artist, of the shaman, is to bring magic to that persuasively. Yeah. Now there is magic in it. Think about before the Big Bang. It's the mystery. It's the great mystery. It's that vast abyss that the ancient Greeks talked about. That vast abyss that was there before the universe came about. And getting a sense of that, it plugs us into the great mystery of existence, the not knowing. Our culture is all about knowing and providing answers, and eventually science will get there and have an answer to everything. This is Elon Musk's hopes for AI. Eventually it will explain everything. It's like, The more you know, the bigger the size of the unknowing becomes. Yeah? Science got so far, yeah, with the universe out there, And then suddenly dark energy came along and we realized we can say nothing about 99% of the universe. So the more we know, the more unknowing things become. On the micro level, you find out more and more and more. You find out about atoms and electrons. And suddenly you've got quantum reality where this huge uncertainty, this huge unknowingness. So we need to surround these scientific stories, which are as good as far as they go, with the unknowingness, that there's something else there, and that consciousness plays a part. Quantum mechanics showed us that, the part that consciousness plays. Yeah. In other words, it dreams reality. Yeah. This seems to be too subtle for most people to realize, even though it's obvious. If you do shamanic work, you realize that we're dreaming. Yeah. You do your shamanic journeying. You do your healing work. Yeah. And the healing work on yourself. And you realize this stuff that happens in this other reality manifests in this reality. That person you put a bit of soul back in, they've now got a sparkle in their eye and a desire to live that they didn't have before. Yeah. And you may have noticed it on yourself when you do your own work with the spirits. That spirit level comes first. So we have experience of the intellectual insight of the quantum physicists. Yeah. We have an emotional understanding, an intuitive understanding, a spirit understanding. Yeah? That there's a reality which is more primary that affects this reality. We get to know that through this spirit work. And so we can bring that insight, we can bring that understanding to the modern mythology of science, which isn't going away. And it doesn't mean other mythologies can't live alongside it. I mean, I can do that. I think the humans have the capacity to do that. Otherwise, Ron's people wouldn't have had more than one creation myth. It's good to be able to hold two stories, take them as equally real. It's not they're just stories, yeah? So when God created the world in 7 days or whatever, Spirit created the universe. That's how we read it, and that is true. That is real. That is more real than the scientific myth, because the scientific myth stops at the Big Bang and it doesn't know where to go back. Yeah. Whereas we go, well, Spirit dreamt it in. Yeah. Spirit dreamt life into being. I mean, evolution, as we understand it, is a mathematical impossibility. So is the start of life to start with. Just blind chance creating this complexity. Forget it. Yeah. There's the dreaming. So, coming back to power. We need to reimagine our world. Yeah. Convincingly. Redream it. And that is a level of functioning which an ordinary shaman wouldn't have. An ordinary shaman has the spirit power working through him and does great work, maybe does powerful healing, yeah, but doesn't necessarily think in this sort of way. Yeah? Doesn't step outside the collective dream, the collective story. Although he will have more of a sense of it, that it is a dream, because he's always being pulled into that spirit reality. And being pulled into that spirituality makes you realize that life is a dreaming. And this is a fundamental understanding of indigenous people, that life is this dreaming. Yeah? They don't necessarily understand it as deeply as someone who spends a lot of time in the spirit world would do, but it's still in them. So I'm coming back again to the power. Yeah, I've wandered off it quite a bit, but this was my other point about power that I wanted to make, is that we have the goods. We have as much power as indigenous people. We need to really claim that. And that's what this chaos shamanism thing that I'm talking about is central to that. Because with chaos shamanism, we're living close to the chaos. We're living close to the unknowingness. We're living close to the great mystery. And if you can live close to that, yeah, which means, putting your ego on ice, so to speak, yeah. Not you need an ego, but not being too determined by it. Not having too many, not using it too much as a prop. yeah, then all the power you will ever need will flow through you. Yeah? If you want power in that bigger sense, yeah, it's not something you really want, but if you aspire to it, it's about being truthful and honest and having humility, doing that at every turn. That will give you all the power there is. It can be the power of the whole universe. We can be this vessel for something infinite. You read about Fool's Crow, famous Lakota medicine man from the 20th century. He could do remarkable healings on people. It was mainly physical healings he did, but it was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And it's because he prayed. He would step aside and pray, and he prayed twice a day. Yeah, talked to the spirit with his pipe, I think. Yeah, and that kept him as this hollow bone, this superb conduit, this really open conduit for spirit. And that's where the power to heal came from and to help. And we've got that just as much as any human in history. Now, some indigenous people, the ones who haven't been pulled too far away from it, may well have in their bones a way of seeing the world that is more congruent with that. They probably do. It's more congruent with that than our modern way. And we can learn from that. We can benefit from that. We can be grateful there's people like that around. But we can live from that as much as them. Yeah, it's that integrity. It's that driving you to live from what is real and what is honest. That's what matters, is the strength of that in you. Some indigenous people will have that. Some won't have it to the same degree. Most people don't have that drive to be really honest with themselves. Yeah? But if you feel disempowered in relation to indigenous people, now I do a bit. I struggle with that one. Yeah, it's this kind of, I'm spooked. Yeah, it's out there. They've got the power and we haven't. It's in our culture. Yeah, they've got more power than us. And of course we can learn from them. Of course we can. And we need to be open to that. But it's a matter of how rigorous you are with yourself. I don't mean that in a control freakery sense. I mean that in a sense of being honest and being open and being humble and listening to yourself and doing that at every moment. Yeah, if you can do that at every moment, you'll have as much power as anyone, indigenous or not. And that's not something to pride yourself on. It's not something to talk about. But it's important we feel that confidence. It's important that we feel we are the real thing. This is one of my central messages. I talk about it a lot because it's so important for the rebirth of shamanism in the West, is that we feel we have that. And we're not forever looking outside to the people who've really got it. No, we've got it. And that doesn't come about through reading books. It doesn't come about through being an apprentice and learning a particular tradition, although that can help. It comes about through that integrity and through that honesty. Yeah. And the joy of that. This is a joyful thing. This isn't a Protestant stern thing. Yeah. Well, it is in a way. You need that. You need that kind of quality. You need a little bit of an Old Testament God in you when it comes to yourself and holding yourself to order sometimes. But actually, it needs to be soft. It needs to be joyful. Yeah. It needs to be the Old Testament God after he's got married. Yeah. And he's mellowed. Yeah. And he stops being such a 4-letter word beginning with C, which he bloody well could be. Look what he did to Job. I mean, for fuck's sakes, what a monster. Yeah. So we need that. That's what gives us the power. The power doesn't lie in particular cultures and in particular trainings. It lies in that. Yeah. And that is something we can all do. And we can hold our heads up high and we can look in a level, equal kind of way at these indigenous people, even at the medicine person. We have our own power. We have our own insight. We have our own wisdom. So that's That's the other kind of power I wanted to talk about in this video. Okay, I think I've made my point. But own it. Own it. We have the power. We can do this thing. We can reinvent ourselves. We can remake that connection to indigeneity, to that sense that we belong to the natural world. That's where our power comes from as well, is feeling that belonging. We feel we belong to nature. We belong to the trees. We belong to the rocks. Then power just flows through us. And it's not ours. It's the universe which we belong to. And we remember who we are. And we remember that this notion we have of a separate, insecure self is just a dream. We've forgotten who we are. And we come back home. And everything we could ever need, all the wisdom, all the compassion, all the healing power, all of that, it can just flow through us.